It's a celebration of America's freedom. Welcome to the Mark Scaringi Show. The Mark Scaringi Show is your place for a weekly discussion on making America great again. The important political and legal issues of the day, a celebration of the Constitution, and traditional American values. Mark is a practicing attorney, a former senatorial candidate, a Donald J. Trump-endorsed delegate, and a defender of the Constitution. His goal? To put America first. And now, celebrating America's freedoms, here's attorney Mark Scaringi.
Well, good afternoon and welcome to the Mark Scaringi Show. This is your place on the dial for constitutional conservatism. This is where we talk about the important political and legal issues of the day from the perspective of putting America first. And thanks for tuning in here on WHP 580 and iHeartRadio. If you'd like to watch prior podcasts of the show or read any of my columns on Penn Live or take a good look at some great merchandise we have, including our popular Right to Bear Arms muscle shirt and the We're Glad You're Our Neighbor, Just Please Don't Kill Us yard signs, then go to the MarkScaringiShow.com website. And for more political and legal news throughout the course of the week, don't forget to follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. Well, Republicans in the House and the Senate have finally joined the fight. They're finally beginning to push back at the Democrats' impeachment investigation into President Trump. Well, as you know, Democrats have been conducting this fake impeachment inquiry without a vote by the whole House, which is, in my view, required by the U.S. Constitution. And Democrats have been conducting this impeachment inquiry in secret, behind closed doors, in this star chamber type proceeding. Well, a couple of dozen House Republicans finally got fed up at being excluded from this impeachment inquiry, and they stormed into the House Intelligence Committee conference room just a few days ago, demanding the right to participate in the secret proceedings. Now, of course, they were denied by the Democrats the right to participate and ultimately had to leave the room. And the gesture was symbolic, yes, but it was important because it emphasized to the American people that the Democrats' impeachment inquiry is a one-sided, secretive sham. The president thanked House Republicans in a tweet for being tough, smart, and understanding in detail, the greatest witch hunt in American history. That's from President Trump. Now, Republicans in the United States Senate also finally spoke up to defend the president. United States Senator Lindsey Graham sponsored a resolution attacking the impeachment process as unconstitutional and unfair, and demanding that the full House vote on the impeachment inquiry, as it has done in the three prior impeachments of United States presidents, including Bill Clinton, Richard Nixon, and Andrew Johnson. 50 Republican U.S. senators have signed on to the resolution. Only 3 are holding out: Susan Collins of Maine, Lisa Murkowski of Alaska, and the never-Trumper-in-chief Mitt Romney of Utah. So some of the biggest news this week came later in the week. The New York Times reports that the Attorney General's administrative inquiry into the origins of the Russian collusion hoax has now become a criminal investigation. Now, this is a critical change in the investigation. It started as an administrative review. Remember way back in the early summer when United States Attorney General Bill Barr was testifying before Congress, and he alluded to the fact that he would be conducting a review of what happened at the Department of Justice, the FBI, and the intelligence agencies during the origins, the beginnings of this counterintelligence investigation into the Trump campaign. Well, the New York Times is now reporting that this administrative review has been transmorphed into a criminal investigation. The Department of Justice prosecutor leading the investigation is U.S. Attorney John Durham. And because it's now a criminal investigation, the U.S. Attorney will have the ability to issue subpoenas, convene a grand jury, compel witnesses to testify, to appear and testify before the grand jury. He'll be able to compel the production of documents, and if he finds a probable cause, to file criminal charges. Now, the Department of Justice, remember, is investigating whether its own department, the Justice Department, and the FBI that is within the Justice Department and those intelligence agencies improperly surveilled the 2016 Trump campaign as part of their investigation into the now thoroughly debunked coordination with Russia during the last presidential election. Recall Special Counsel Bob Mueller's investigation found insufficient evidence of a criminal conspiracy between the Trump campaign and Russia. In short, the question is, did the Obama administration use the Department of Justice and the FBI to go after its political enemies? That seems to be the question that United States Attorney General Bill Barr and U.S. Attorney John Durham are asking. And I think the answer is pretty clearly yes. Now, John Durham has reportedly received briefings on the, quote, four corners, end quote, of the FBI's use of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, these FISA warrants, as part of its counterintelligence operation into the Trump campaign. According to Fox News, Durham is specifically reviewing the FISA warrant obtained by the FBI to surveil Trump campaign aide Carter Page, as well as general issues relating to surveillance during the 2016 campaign and matters flowing from the FISA process. Now remember, the FBI used that dirty dossier, that dodgy dossier, that has been entirely debunked, the one written by Christopher Steele, a foreign agent. Remember, Christopher Steele was a foreign agent hired by the Hillary Clinton campaign, paid by the Clinton campaign and the Democratic National Committee to dig up dirt on then-candidate Donald J. Trump. So this was the Clinton campaign and the DNC paying foreign agents, foreign nationals, to influence a United States presidential campaign, which is clearly a violation of federal campaign law. But of course, it's Hillary Clinton, it's the Democratic National Committee. They get a pass. They're not, I guess, allowed by the rule of whatever to be investigated and prosecuted for campaign finance violations. But that dossier that was compiled by a foreign agent at the behest of Hillary Clinton, that was used by the FBI to obtain a FISA warrant to surveil Carter Page. And remember, in that FISA warrant application, which is the document the investigators and prosecutors put before the judge in support of their request for a court order permitting them to spy on American citizens, the application did not disclose that the information that was included in the FISA warrant was actually part of the dirty dossier. The information was not compiled by FBI agents during the course of their normal duties in investigating whatever it is that they were investigating. Actually, it was counterintelligence at that time. No, that's not where the information came from. That's not where the material came from. The material came from opposition research by a foreign agent paid for by Hillary Clinton and the DNC. That's what was in the application for the FISA warrant. And the investigators and prosecutors who presented that warrant application to the FISA court judge did not disclose that the material information included therein was bought and paid for by the political opponent of the then candidate, Donald J. Trump. More on this when we return from this brief commercial break. You're listening to The Mark Scaringi Show. And welcome back to The Mark Scaringi Show, your place on the dial for constitutional conservatism. We're talking about the important political and legal issues of the day from the perspective of putting America first. We're talking about the latest developments in the impeachment inquiry going on down in Washington, D.C. I believe another witness was ushered into the House Intelligence Committee conference room just an hour or two ago as House Democrats continue their secret closed-door Star Chamber investigation into all things Donald Trump. And we're talking about also the Department of Justice has transferred its administrative review over the origins of the counterintelligence investigation into Donald Trump's campaign, led by the high-ranking members of the Department of Justice and the FBI, initiated also by the directors of the National Intelligence Agency, the Central Intelligence Agency, among other intelligence officials. And the reports coming out of the New York Times last night are that the Attorney General and the chief prosecutor in charge of this investigation, John Durham, they apparently are now calling this a criminal investigation, which gives them much more power, many more tools to be utilized in conducting their investigation: subpoena power, the right to compel witnesses, the right to compel documents. They can convene a grand jury, and if the grand jury returns, they can present an indictment to a grand jury. If the grand jury returns the indictment, then the criminal charges would be filed, purportedly against high-ranking members of the Obama administration. But that is speculation at this point. All we have is a leak that went to the New York Times. The New York Times is reporting it's now a criminal investigation. We're going to talk more about this, but I want to take some calls because we have a caller, David from San Francisco, calling all the way in from the other side of the state. Welcome to the Mark Scaringi Show. The other side of the country, that is.
Oh, yeah, morning, Mark, or afternoon, I guess, for you, right?
That's right, yes. David, how are you? How's the weather in San Francisco?
Oh, it's comfortable, although I'll tell you this, these fires are a little problematic. We're pretty beleaguered by, global warming is real out here. If you know the snowpack in the mountains,
yeah,
that's what we rely on. The Central Valley relies on snowpack, and if the snow melts too early, and in previous years, I think, was it 3 years ago now, the snow all melted by the end of January. There wasn't a bit of snow up in the mountains by the end of January. So that meant the farmers in the Central Valley were out of water, by April, basically. And the idea that we ended up with wildfires, you can't put out a fire if you don't have water. And it's pretty dangerous. And the fact that Trump and, some of these, I'll just call them, kissers up to the polluters. Global warming was created by polluters, right? They poisoned the planet, and the planet is dying and getting too warm, and as the heat builds up, the snow melts early, and California ends up with dry lands, which can catch fire.
Well, David, stay safe, and let's hurry up and get to your question on impeachment, because we are consuming a massive amount of energy and carbon right now to bring this call in from San Francisco all the way to Harrisburg. So we don't want to kill off too much of the environment during this call, but let's hear what is your question, or what's your opinion on what's going on in Washington, D.C.?
Well, one of the most amazing scandals in this whole thing is that Trump is pretending that impeachment inquiries don't exist. And he's obstructing justice by declaring that because it's not the right of Congress to do an inquiry, that he's not allowing employees of the federal government to testify. So that's a pretty bald-faced version of obstruction of justice.
Well, just let me respond by saying this. His position is that the impeachment inquiry, in order to be lawful and valid and constitutional, needs to derive from the full House of Representatives, because
and that vote is already, if you want to count the votes ahead of time, it's already there.
Well, then,
so he's obstructing justice by ordering his employees to not show up.
No, he's not obstructing justice. His position in court, and he's litigating this in court.
And that judge already made the ruling saying that he's full of it, and that he has no right to pretend that we, the people. You see, Trump works for us. We, the people, whether or not he was elected or not, he is our employee. Now, a spoiled rich boy like Trump has never been an employee for anybody. He doesn't know what it's like to be an employee. He pretends to be a king, and that he doesn't have a responsibility to us to explain his actions.
Well,
now, you were pretending that Carter Page, or in the case of Flynn, weren't in collusion with Russia long before Trump even election day even happened. So there were security inquiries into what these guys were doing over there.
Yeah, there was.
And so those security inquiries were already determining that they were up to some shady business.
Yeah, well, let me just say this, David. Donald Trump, as a private citizen, and even today, has hired and has employed tens of thousands of Americans in good-paying jobs. So he knows something about about employees and employment. And on the issue of obstruction of justice, he has every legal right to go into court to make a legal argument in opposition to an action being taken against him by the Congress. We did have a ruling that went against the Trump administration yesterday from a district court. And what does the president have the right to do? Appeal that decision to an appellate court. So he's using his rights as a litigant in the court system. That's not obstructing justice. So
telling the employees of the U.S. government, he pretends that they're employees of him, but in fact they're employees of the U.S. government. And if we, the people, have determined that something strange is going on, and that strangeness has to do with whether or not our tax dollars are being sent improperly to other nations, and in the case of the Ukraine, that's short of $500 million, right? That he pocketed for about 2 or 3 months, and actually, you think about it, for the last 70 years, since the end of World War II, the U.S. has been slowly but surely surrounding the Soviet Union and now Russia. And we finally got within attack distance, and then Trump cuts off the budget for the Ukraine military.
The president didn't pocket a dime of the $400 million.
We don't know that. He doesn't. He's not disclosing that.
There's not been one scintilla of evidence that President Trump. There's not even an allegation
that
he's
is,
pocketed
because of
a dime of the
overnight
$400 million. That is the most farcical statement I've heard
That's
anybody
not true
comment
at all.
on
Not
this
true at
particular
all. The
issue.
overnight
Firstly,
fund.
secondly. Every member of the executive branch of the federal government of the United States of America is an employee of Donald Trump. Donald Trump, pursuant to the Constitution, is the chief executive officer of the executive branch of the federal government. They are all inferior agents and employees to him. There is no one.
Americans are inferior.
Employees of the federal government in the executive branch work for Donald Trump. He is the chief executive. Listen to me. Listen to me, David. If you are an employee of the executive branch, let's take, for instance, Peter Strzok or Lisa Page. They work for Donald Trump. He is their chief executive officer. We, the American people, elected Donald Trump to be the chief executive officer and the chief magistrate of the executive branch of the federal government. So
he's no magistrate.
Ask James Madison and Alexander Hamilton why they use that terminology in the Federalist Papers to describe and define the role of the chief executive in our constitutional republic.
A magistrate is not a king, and the idea that
he's not. I'm not saying he's a king. I'm not saying he's a king, but he is the chief executive officer of the executive branch.
And he works for us.
Ultimately, we elected him, yes, but Peter Strzok and Lisa Page work for him. I mean, do you understand the distinction there?
Right, and if they're committing crimes, and if Carter Page is committing crimes, and
Carter Page has not committed a crime. The Justice Department's been investigating Carter Page for 3 years. They have not brought any criminal charges against him because they have no evidence. Bob Mueller and former FBI Director James Comey conducted a 2+ year investigation into this fake Russian collusion hoax, including Carter Page, and found nothing about Carter Page that was criminal.
That's not true at all.
It's 1,000% true. It's 1,000% true.
Don't lie to your audience.
Hey, David.
The people.
Point to me the indictment or the criminal complaint alleging Carter Page committed a crime. Where can I find that?
Look at the.
You're going to have to fabricate it because it doesn't exist.
I don't have to fabricate a thing. I don't have that evidence, or excuse me, that document number in front of me.
Because,
I have to look
David,
it up.
It doesn't exist.
That's because you're claiming that, but that's not true. Carter Page has already been indicted, and the fact is that if he's acting as a witness now, that
Carter Page has not been
his,
indicted. What are you talking about?
Well, let's talk about Flynn, for example.
Let's talk about Carter. Let's stick with Carter Page. You're stating that Carter Page has committed a crime, that there's some sort of document, which you're now calling an indictment, that has indicted Carter Page for committing crimes. You're making that up. That doesn't exist. He was investigated for 2.5 years, and no charges were brought against Carter Page.
Do you want me to spend time looking up the data on him, or are you going to give me that time? Because the fact of the matter is that Carter Page was under inquiry before Election Day, and that has to do with the security state because he was involved with Putin and in Russia. And what it comes down to is that he was helping set up business arrangements for Donald Trump in advance of Election Day. And part of those business arrangements lead to Flynn and a setup of 53 nuclear power plants that they were trying to build from Saudi Arabia up into...
Flynn was certainly set up. He was set up and entrapped by the FBI and the Department of Justice. And you're seeing developments right now in court.
Why did Flynn resign?
You're seeing developments right now in court where his attorney is exposing the Obama Justice Department for entrapping Lieutenant General Michael Flynn. Hey, David, you can call. Hey, David, I've got to take a brief commercial break, and I'll let you back on. I got to hang up now. I got to go to a break. But if you can find the indictment or the criminal complaint naming Carter Page, that Carter Page has committed crimes, I'll let you back on the show, and we can talk all about it. David, thanks. David from San Francisco, thank you very much. We're going to take a brief commercial break. Stay tuned. We'll be back right after this. And welcome back to the Mark Scaringi Show, your place on the dial for constitutional conservatism. This is the place where we talk about the important political and legal issues of the day from the perspective of putting America first. And we're talking about the impeachment inquiry and the Department of Justice criminal investigation into the Obama administration, high-ranking officials who, for the origins and how they came about, beginning this counterintelligence investigation into the Trump campaign. Bill Barr, U.S. Attorney General, and the U.S. Attorney John Durham apparently have converted this from an administrative inquiry into a criminal investigation. So we'll see how that develops. We heard from our friend David from San Francisco, and I'll tell you, I'm glad to know that we have people on the other side of the political spectrum listening to the Mark Scaringi Show, and all the way from San Francisco, California, a formerly beautiful city that has been destroyed by decades of extreme liberal rule. And we're glad to hear from him. He's a little overheated, apparently, from all that global warming out there, casting aspersions that Carter Page has been subject to a criminal indictment or a criminal complaint. And I will give David a little bit of unsolicited free legal advice. Be careful about stating that someone has committed a crime, particularly when they haven't. That is, in Pennsylvania, defamation per se, to falsely state that someone has committed a crime. So be a little bit careful about casting those aspersions. And perhaps that's what Donald Trump was talking about a while back when he was talking about the libel laws and the defamation laws need to be reformed somewhat because public figures, it's very easy to defame a public figure. Is Carter Page a public figure? I'm not so sure that he is. So, and David from San Francisco, you're welcome to call back, and we'll put you right on if you can present me proof that Carter Page has been indicted or is the subject of a criminal complaint, criminal charges being filed against him. Of course, you're not going to be able to find that, so you're not going to be back on the Mark Scaringi Show on that issue, but you can call back on any others. All right. Getting back to the topic of today's show, we're talking about, at this particular point, about how the FBI used the Steele dossier obtained by the Steele dossier that was bought and paid for by the Hillary Clinton Democratic National Committee campaign. And they used that as the basis for their warrant under the FISA court to obtain a court order to permit them to surveil, to spy on volunteers and associates of the Donald J. Trump campaign. And recall U.S. Attorney General Bill Barr stated when he was testifying before Congress in May that he thought spying did occur and that spying on a campaign is a big deal. Now, instead of lauding the Department of Justice for launching this investigation, which this Barr-Durham investigation is premised upon the rule of law and ensuring that prosecutors, in their zeal to investigate and root out crime, that they're not violating the rule of law. House Democrats are attacking the Attorney General instead of lauding him for launching this investigation. Now, Democratic Congressman Gerald Nadler, who chairs the House Judiciary Committee, and Adam Schiff, who chairs the House Intelligence Committee, issued a statement via Twitter. If the Department of Justice may be used as a tool of political retribution or to help the president with a political narrative for the next election, the rule of law will suffer new and irreparable damage. This is according to Nadler and Schiff. Well, my point on that, my take on that is actually the Department of Justice is investigating whether President Obama used the Department of Justice as a tool for political retribution, as a tool to take out the political opponent of his former Secretary of State and the head of his political party, the Democratic Party, that is Hillary Clinton. And so that's what Bill Barr is looking into. Did the Obama administration, maybe President Obama himself, certainly high-ranking members of his administration, some of whom carried over in the Trump administration, did they use the awesome power of the intelligence state and the surveillance state through this fake, phony dossier to launch a spying operation into their political opponents? That's exactly what Bill Barr and John Durham are trying to get to the bottom of. And Democrats should congratulate them, should applaud them, and should say, carry on, do the work, find out if the Constitution, the rule of law, find out if they were violated by President Barack Obama, former FBI Director Jim Comey, former Director of National Intelligence James Clapper, and the former CIA Director Mr. Brennan. Let's get to the bottom of it. That's what Democrats should be saying, but they're not. Oh, looks like we have David from San Francisco is back on the phone lines. Tori, does he have the document in hand?
I believe he'll tell you.
Okay, let's hear it from David from San Francisco. You're back on the Mark Scaringi Show. How are you?
Well, not too bad, Mark.
Okay.
Although I'll stand corrected about his conviction. According to if you go to Wikipedia on Carter Page, it goes through the whole business. And it says that the Mueller report says that he was not charged with any crimes, though the report indicated there were unanswered questions about his actions and motives. So I think I was confusing him with Rick Gates.
Okay, so now do you retract, David? This is let's get down to brass tacks here. Do you retract the earlier statement you made that Carter Page was charged with the commission of a crime?
Well, he was trying to roll back the McGinsky Act, which had to do with whether or not these people
David,
could be convicted.
Now, if I'm
So
an attorney, I would object. Your answer is non-responsive, and let's be very take this very seriously, because in Pennsylvania, if you falsely state that someone has committed a crime, you could be sued for defamation.
Well, that's Pennsylvania's laws.
You're calling into a Pennsylvania-based radio station.
That's not logic.
Yeah. Hey, David from San Francisco. Do the right thing. Do the right thing. Be a man. Man up and say, Mr. Scaringi, I apologize. I was wrong. I retract my prior false statement.
Scaringi, I apologize. I was wrong for saying that Carter Page was convicted, but...
No, you didn't say he was convicted. You said he was charged with a crime. Don't wiggle out of that. You said he was charged with a crime. And now you're calling back to admit that he was not. So just apologize for making a false statement about Carter Page.
I'm not gonna go there, because the fact of the matter is when you just read the Wikipedia entry for Carter Page, and you see so much Russian collusion that it's amazing that you guys have been lying about this for 3 years.
Well, here's what I suggest you do then: fill out a private criminal complaint and see if you can get a U.S. attorney.
Trying to dodge the fact that he had collusion with Russia, that Carter Page was working for Trump while he was working around Russia, and that to pretend that he wasn't convicted doesn't deal with the fact that he may still be a witness, and he's working with the FBI and the courts in acting as a witness is still underway, and it is
a witness for what? The special counsel Mueller investigations is over.
No, it's not. We have never seen the full Mueller report because of the collusion of Attorney General Barr. Attorney General Barr is about as dirty as you can get.
Special counsel Bob Mueller concluded his investigation and retired. It's over.
No, it's not over. We, the people, paid for that inquiry, and that
was a big waste of money, $40 million waste of taxpayer dollars.
You're a fool for believing that we could spend money to find out if crimes have been committed, and we actually made money from that when we took the mansions of Manafort. Manafort was the guy that pulled the coup. In Ukraine, right?
Yeah, there was
Manafort.
not one crime filed against Paul Manafort alleged conspiracy, coordination, or collusion with the Russians or Russian agents to interfere in the U.S. election.
What was the coup for?
Now, I just easily proved you wrong on your prior false statement that Carter Page was charged with a crime. I easily proved you wrong there. You admitted that you made a false statement. Now, do I need to do it again? Do I need to prove that you made another false statement when you allege that Paul Manafort was charged and convicted of collusion, conspiracy, or coordination with the Russian government to interfere in the U.S. election? Because I'll go two for nothing against you on these issues.
I tell you what, let's split the difference. Is Russia a legitimate government, or is Russia a pack of oligarchs who are really super rich guys who basically carved up Russia, and that the people of Russia have no government? They're just being run by the oligarchs. Now, when you say that he was working for Russia, no, he wasn't working for the Russian people. He was working for an oligarch who was trying to make sure that the Ukraine coup, and Manafort was paid to run a coup, right? And he's sitting in jail because he didn't pay taxes on the money that he made for running a coup.
Hey, David, I got to let you go. This is fascinating left-wing, extremist, liberal conspiracy theories. But I got to get back to the real news. David from San Francisco, thank you very much for calling. Why don't you spend the rest of your afternoon cleaning up the streets of San Francisco? We're going to take a brief commercial break. Stay tuned. We'll be back right after this. And welcome back to the Mark Scaringi Show, your place on the dial for constitutional conservatism. This is where we talk about the important political and legal issues of the day from the perspective of putting America first. We're talking about the fake impeachment inquiry and the Department of Justice criminal investigation now into the shenanigans conducted by high-ranking members of the Obama administration when they opened that counterintelligence investigation into associates, colleagues, friends, people Trump didn't even know of the Donald Trump campaign that they used as the basis for the FBI's investigation, the Mueller investigation. It all turned out to be one big hoax. And we've taken two calls from our friend David from San Francisco. And I'll tell you, I'm just pleased to know that I have other listeners to the show other than my wife, mother, and that very smart lady from Enola. It's good to know we have maybe 4 or 5 listeners. And it's also actually nice to have someone call in and take a different position than the positions that I take on the show, and even take a couple of shots at me. But you saw how easily we swatted him down and proved that he made 2 false statements. That was very easy to do. It reminds me of my days in court cross-examining witnesses, and so it's bringing back good memories. And we'll open up the phone lines, and we'll take a few more calls. Well, let me make one more point, and then we'll go to the phone the phone booth here. I did want to point this out, that high-ranking members of the Obama administration, and such as Director of National Intelligence James Clapper and former Director of the CIA John Brennan, I tell you, they're getting a bit nervous about these developments, about the Durham criminal investigation. And I was watching CNN, and Anderson Cooper was doing a story on the breaking news involving the Department of Justice opening up this criminal investigation. And who did he have on his show to comment on it? James Clapper, the former director of DNI and one of the main instigators behind this fake counterintelligence investigation and the fake Russian collusion hoax. Now, during the segment, and you can Google it because it's funny to watch Clapper's facial expressions and how awkward and uncomfortable he was in his television appearance. But I think he is a paid contributor to give his opinion on the national intelligence or national security issues of the day. But now he's commenting on his own investigation into him. And during the segment, Clapper admitted he's the target of the very criminal investigation that Anderson Cooper is reporting on. Yet CNN has Clapper commenting and giving his opinion on it like he would give any other, like he would opine on any other issue that CNN was discussing. So let me ask you this. Do you think Clapper's opinion as a paid opinion person, do you think it was a bit maybe biased in that he's the target of the investigation that he's being asked to comment on? I should say so. But this is what passes for news. The CNN does a story on the John Durham criminal investigation. One of the main targets is Clapper, and they have Clapper on to give his opinion, like a talking head. Like, instead of having an in-depth interview, a cross-examination of him because he's the target of the investigation, no, we're going to seek his opinion on it. And what do you think his opinion on it was? Oh, he didn't think there was anything wrong there. Well, of course he's going to say that. You don't think he's going to say, oh, well, Anderson, great questions. Actually, Anderson Cooper even asked him what the Department of Justice, what the DOJ was investigating, and whether what they were investigating, could that be a crime? What do you think Clapper said? He said, I don't know. Of course he's going to say, I don't know. Do you think he's going to point out on national television the various crimes that he committed to properly and truthfully answer the question posed to him by CNN's Anderson Cooper? I mean, this is fake news at its height. Anyway, we'll open up the phone lines and we'll take a call. Carrie from Hershey, you're on the Mark Scaringi Show. Yes, hi. Carrie, go ahead.
Hi, Mark. Yes, I agree 100% with you.
Oh, good. I like to hear that.
Hillary and her minions are the dirty ones. That guy from San Francisco. I have relatives in San Francisco. Him and his Democratic buds are ruining that beautiful, beautiful state. If there's anything that's polluting, those Democrats are polluting it. They're ruining the forest. They're having homes burned. They have not done anything to help the poor people of California. And I really agree with you. There is such a problem right now, and if that guy from San Francisco is concerned, he would read Sidney Powell's book, License to Lie, and find out some real truth that's going on. The American people want to know what's going on. They don't want lies like he seems to believe. We want the truth, and to find the truth, you got to investigate and find it, but you got to hear from all sides. He's just listening to one side, and he's not listening to the truth, and I agree with you. You got to find what the truth is, and you got to find what's going on, and it stinks over there. And if he thinks about Russians, he ought to look at Hillary and her minions. They've been dealing with the Russians for years. You should see pictures of her with Putin. She looks at him like she's in love.
The Clintons got rich off the Russians. The Russians paid Bill Clinton $500,000 to give a 40-minute talk.
It's ridiculous. So I'm just going to make it brief, but I love your show, and just keep the fight.
Well, thank you, Carrie. Appreciate that. That's Carrie from Hershey, and Carrie brought up the attorney Sidney Powell, who is the new attorney for Lieutenant General Michael Flynn, and boy, she is tough. That Sidney Powell, I think, is doing, and I have started to read that book that Carrie mentioned, Sidney Powell's book. about the Enron investigation, and some of the same prosecutors involved in the Enron investigation were also involved in were on Bob Mueller's team, his special counsel team, and that Sidney Powell is very tough. I'm glad that Lieutenant General Michael Flynn has hired her. She filed a motion in court, I believe, was that yesterday, I think, really taking to task the United States government for not providing exculpatory evidence in their prosecution of Lieutenant General Michael Flynn. So let's keep our fingers crossed and see if justice can really be done. It's pretty clear that General Flynn was entrapped by James Comey and his brethren there in the Justice Department and in the FBI. So we'll have to follow those developments and see how they pan out. Now, in related news, the Trump administration suffered a setback in federal court. Yesterday, the United States District Court Judge Beryl Howell, who is an Obama appointee, she ordered the administration to comply with a subpoena issued by the House Judiciary Committee requesting material from the grand jury impaneled by former special counsel Bob Mueller as part of his Russian collusion investigation. Now, the White House, and I actually referenced this briefly with David from San Francisco, and actually David brought this up in the context of the White House obstructing justice. And I have to respond, no. Objecting to a subpoena, filing a motion to quash, litigating the issue in court is not obstructing justice. It's asserting your legal rights in court. Now, ultimately, a judge will decide. In this case, the judge decided against the Trump administration. It is true that the White House had refused to comply with the subpoena, but on grounds that the House committees who issued it were not conducting a valid, lawful impeachment inquiry. The judge ruled that the Democrats' impeachment investigation into Trump is proper. It's a proper judicial proceeding, and as such, the subpoena was lawful and valid, and so the Trump administration will be compelled to comply. Now, what they're at, now, of course, Trump's going to, the White House is going to appeal. This is going to go up through the appellate courts. We'll see how far it goes. Courts typically don't like to get into these types of issues. These are political questions. Impeachment is a big political question, and courts are somewhat reluctant to get involved. Now, we'll see how this issue develops. But what they're looking for, what the House committees are looking for, are simply the redacted portions of the materials that Bob Mueller used to conduct his investigation and compile his report. U.S. Attorney General Bill Barr sent over the overwhelming majority of those materials unredacted. He redacted some that resulted directly from the grand jury, and as we know, grand jury proceedings are required to be secret. Our former Attorney General in Pennsylvania, Kathleen Kane, learned that lesson the hard way. She spent a year or two in prison for disclosing grand jury materials. So one could see why U.S. Attorney General Bill Barr is a little reluctant to just hand over grand jury materials when a prosecutor could go to jail for doing so. So, of course, they're going to litigate the issue, and they're going to get a court order compelling them to do so before they go off and do something that could get themselves charged criminally. We have time for one quick call before we hit the end of the show. Jeff from York, you're on the Mark Scaringi Show.
Yes, I'm looking at a document from a federal case, number 98, filed 10/23/19, page 4. It says, no one would be hurt and the greater justice would be attained, and violated 18 U.S.C. 1001 on the 3rd of January. That's Nancy Pelosi making the statement via her lawyer.
Jeff, what are you referring to again?
This is case 519 CV 00834, document 98, filed 10/23/19.
What does the document say?
It says, Nancy Pelosi, in her official capacity did violate via her lawyer, Mr. Donald B. Varelli Jr., and stated no one would be hurt and the greater justice would be attained, and violated 18 U.S.C. on 3rd of January 2019 on page 24 of the filing that was made in case 418 CV 00160.
All right, Jeff, I got to run. I want to thank you for putting out that document. We'll take a look at it and see what it says and determine what relevance it has. Thanks for calling, and thanks for listening to the Mark Scaringi Show.